22 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. They see that the whites are so evenly divided that every time they vote, the race is so close, they have to go back and count the votes all over again. And which means that any block, any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power. You're the one who put the present Democratic administration in Washington, D.C. The whites were evenly divided. It was the fact that you threw 80% of your votes behind the Democrats that put the Democrats in the White House. When you see this, you can see that the Negro vote is the key factor. And despite the fact that you are in a position to be the determining factor, what do you get out of it? The Democrats have been in Washington, D.C. only because of the Negro vote. You put them first and they put you last. Because you're a chump. A political chump. Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
For the People Act make automatic registration and mandate nationwide, not just in certain states or in certain counties, but nationwide. We must get there, and we will get there as Democrats. We will get there as citizens of this great country. Restore voting rights to felons who pay their debt to society. I truly believe, deep in my heart, so, the way folks were not counting birds in Georgia, in Florida, other states, changed the outcome of the last election. That must never happen again in our time. Never again. Never again.
I want to talk today about the push for universal automatic voter registration throughout the entire country. And I specifically want to deal with this because the face that they're putting in front of this is a face that's meant to make people feel comfortable with the passing of this very, very nefarious law. Ex-Black Panther member Representative John Lewis out of Atlanta is the one that is sponsoring this bill, along with obviously some other Democrats. It's always the Democrats doing something that's going to completely violate your rights. And the way that the automatic voter registration law would work is essentially if you have any existing record with the government. So, Department of Motor Vehicles, if you're getting public assistance, if you use USPS, the United States Postal Service, if you have a Social Security number, the Social Security Administration, if at any time you've had contact with the government agency, the government would automatically register you to vote. And you can opt out, but the fact that you've ever dealt with one of these agencies would essentially mean that you would automatically be registered to vote. Now, the Democrats are hailing this as though it's something positive. They're putting an ex-Black Panther face and a black man's face on this to make it seem like it's about disenfranchised people. And they're also tacking on something to give criminals their right to vote back. Now, let's be clear. Felons aren't going to get their rights to vote back. We know that this bill will go to the floor written like this so that the public will support it, and then they'll drop the felons off and we'll all just be getting registered to vote. But, it's a good way to get the public behind it, specifically the Black community and Latino community behind this nefarious bill. And I want to talk about what my real problem is with automatic voter registration. Number one, it starts a slippery slope of the government passing laws where it makes decisions for you and it applies to itself on your behalf, because that's what it is when you register to vote. If you look at the form, even though we call it registering to vote, it's really an application to vote. And when you apply to something, you're essentially, according to Black's Law Dictionary, because I think it's important that we understand the legal definitions of these words, is that you're requesting or you're petitioning an individual, and individuals can be companies and corporations as well. You're petitioning them for the right to do one thing or the other. So essentially now the government will be petitioning itself on your behalf for voting. And there are a lot of things that I'm not going to talk about here that come into making the choice to vote, and the questions that are asked on that form and how they are answered. Because mind you, if the government is making the petition, they are also answering the questions that are on the form for you on your behalf. And so it'd be a wide breadth where the government is essentially filling out an entire application for you every time you move, every time a new election cycle comes up and there's a need for registration on your behalf. And it completely eliminates your ability to not register via inaction. So in order to not register, you would have to engage in actual action. And this is very, very dangerous. This is dangerous territory. The idea that the government would petition itself on your behalf and you would have to opt out of its automatic petitioning to maintain your sovereignty and your decision making as a citizen is absolutely insane. And big government has a way of killing freedom. Large government has a way of ripping you and raping you of your rights. And so I think that it's essential that we really keep an eye on this, that we not be moved by the face of the man who is being put in front of this movement. And I'm not going to go as far as calling him a traitor, y'all. But I'm going to say that I'm tired of these black men, being made the face of things that are dangerous for us. Obama was the face of a universal health care law. And that was shot down by the Supreme Court a couple of times when the Social Security Act was shot down as being mandatory for all people because of the slippery slope it creates of the government creating laws that we cannot say no to. Everything in our country was an if or then. If you want to do this, then you have to do that. And the government is slowly trying to rip that away. And when we add not being able to say no to a situation where the government is petitioning itself, because when you register to vote, you're petitioning the government for a right to vote in its elections. When the government starts petitioning itself on your behalf, that's a problem. Y'all, that's a real problem. When the government starts to petition itself on behalf of individual Americans and tells you the only way it won't do that is if you opt out and this is somehow a good idea, I've got to give it the side eye. And I have to say that our government is running amok and the Democrats need to be stopped. I mean, I don't like the Republicans any better, but this mess is getting out of control. And they think every time they smack a black face on something, everybody's just going to be acquiescent. And I hope that people don't take this lying down and they recognize this sleight of hand for what it is. This is a problem. It is a problem. And Representative John Lewis and all those little black faces that stood behind him, nodding their little heads, should be ashamed of themselves. And I just want to reiterate, the portion of this law as it is written, as this bill, it's not a law yet, but the portion of this bill as it is written that gives criminals that have been convicted of felonies the right to vote back after they serve their time, it is not going to pass. They have only thrown that clause in to get public support. But understand that when a bill hits the floor, they cut it up and come to an agreement. And the first thing to be sacrificed in that bill is going to be felons getting the right to vote. But the thing that will pass will be the government automatically petitioning itself on your behalf, unless you opt out. Mark my words when I say this is how it's going to happen. I know there's not going to be a public outcry. I know people are going to whine and complain, but not in enough numbers to shut this down. I know that the government really wants this power. The Republicans are pretending like they don't, but they do too. And when I say Democrat and Republicans, I'm not talking about the common person like you and I. I'm talking about these people in power. But mark my words. They'll get it passed. They will get it passed. If not the first time around, they will get it passed universally. But felons will not get their right to vote back. So if you are thinking about backing this bill because you believe that's going to be what happens, think again. They're just throwing the felons in there for the black and Latino vote. And once they get your visible backing in public, they will throw it out and it'll hit the chopping block when it hits the House and the Senate floors. But what will happen is you will lose a little bit of your rights when they pass this automatic voter registration law. And that's some food for thought. And with that said, I'm going to get out of here.